Hey y'all, it's Amanda again, and this is video number 3 of our beginner series. So I'm live every day this week at noon talking about something different. Yesterday we talked about palette knives and I gave you a little demonstration of how I use palette knives in my work. Let's see, what did we do the day before? We talked about supplies. Monday we talked about supplies. Yesterday we talked about palette knives, and today we're going to talk about mixed media. What does that mean? Why do I use that term to describe the kind of art that I create? And I'm going to give you a few examples and show you a few things. If you have questions, then you can type them in the comments and I'll do my best to give you an answer. So we're going to start with this giant here. This one is 36 by 36. It's a big canvas, and it is one of the most creative pieces that I've done, I believe. There is so much stuff going on in this painting, and it took me about a year. I started on it, and then I would add to it, and then I would add to it. By the way, this one's going to be available on my website on May the 14th. I'm going to have a new collection of original art on May the 14th, and this will be one of the paintings that will be available. But that's just a side note there. So when someone says mixed media art, all that really means is there's a mixture of mediums or media, whatever you want to. Some people say mixed medium. So that just means that it's not just one kind of paint, or it's not just watercolor, or it's not just acrylics, or it's not just oils. There is a mixture of stuff that is combined to create that piece of work. So that is what I do. I don't just use paint. I use more than just paint to create the majority of my paintings. And one of the reasons why I really love doing this is because you can make it, I'm going to have to drink some water, hang on. You can make it so unique and very different from anything that anyone else can make. So that's one of my pet peeves, I guess, is originality. Most people who are artists really want to make things that are unique, because that is just part of creativity. You want to make something different than everyone else. You may want to use some of the techniques and the styles and the ideas that you get from several different people, but when you put them all together, then you're going to have your own unique way of creating. So that's sort of what I have done to create the style that I use to make paintings. And that term mixed media, like I said, it just means that I'm mixing different mediums when I'm creating. So we're going to look at this painting first. I'm going to pull it a little bit closer to the camera, and maybe you can see all of the stuff that's here. Okay, so there's paint, of course. There's acrylic paint here. There's also burlap. I don't know if you can see that. It's here, it's here. So on this canvas, I have used burlap to make these leaves. There's also paper. So this would be collage work, paper collage. There's paper here, there's paper here. There are pieces of fabric and paper and paint all over the whole canvas. So there is a layer of acrylic paint first, and then I actually do the painting in acrylics. Then as that paint, sometimes while it's still wet, I add the paper, and then I may put more paint on top of that. So it's just layers and layers of different things. So let's look at, move it this way. Let's look at this. I don't think I can reach all the way over there. This right here is a giant piece of lace that goes all the way up the side there. This stripe material right here is actually fabric. It was a shirt of my husband's that he was going to get rid of, so I just tore it up and used it in this painting. There's also a piece of that fabric here. And these black polka dots are tissue paper. This is a piece of a cross stitch pattern. There is the burlap, of course, like I said. And then the flowers are like a combination of paint and a little bit of some collage work. So there's a piece of a napkin right there. Over here, there's some more fabric. There's just all kinds of different elements working together, all kinds of different media or mediums that you can use, especially in acrylic work. You can combine lots of different things and make something really unique and really fun. So some of you may have seen some of the newer flower paintings that I've been doing, like this one. See if I can get it close enough that it doesn't mess up the picture. But this one is acrylic and it's also some paper collage. So up here, I've got some, it's kind of a brown color. You can probably see, maybe. I've got a piece of an old dress pattern that I've put down here. And these leaves here, of course, are just paper. And then we've got the paint here that is acrylic. I did this work with a palette knife. So for this one, there is a lot of paper, a lot of different things going on. But some of my work, like this one, for example, it's mostly paint and just 4 little pieces of paper that are added in there, but they just make it so unique and different. So here's another one. I've just added paper here in the center of these. So you can use it to make a big statement, or you can use collage papers like I use in smaller ways. Let's see, this one here, we worked on this a little bit yesterday. The only place where there's paper is in the container here, the vase that's holding the flowers. So I don't always do things exactly the same, which that's just part of my own creative process. And I don't always add paper. Sometimes I may add more than one kind of paint. So you can use watercolor and acrylic together. You can use acrylic and then put oil on top, but you can't reverse that. You can use watercolor pencils. You can use inks. You can use just about anything that you can buy at the craft store or the art store. You can put all those things together in mixed media art. And that is why I really like it so much, because you can use some of everything and you can really, really get creative with it. Another thing that I like to do, grab this, is use stamps. So if you paint something with acrylics and you let it dry, you can use rubber stamps and add words to your paintings. You can also use, like once you stamp it on there with the ink, you may need to go over it and darken it a little bit or something like that. So you could use some markers for that. You could use some acrylic pens for that. There's so much, y'all, that you can use and create, and mixed media art is my very favorite. So I know I had one question from Holly the other day. Not the other day, that was today. It's been a long morning. So she was asking about adding papers and the paper pattern and color fading when using gel medium. I will say this, if you're using the gel, the actual gel medium, sometimes it will smear the print, the color that's on different printed papers. The quality of your paper is gonna have something to do with that. Also, if you have printed it yourself and you try to use something like this to put it down, it may smear the ink on that. So Holly was asking about trying to put a fixative on top of it, or trying to seal it before you actually put it down, and that may work. I don't know, I haven't tried that, but usually if I'm using something that I printed myself, we have an inkjet printer. So when I print like a vintage, you can go online. When I say print, I don't know if I've explained that. You can go online to something like thegraphicsfairy.com, and there are all kinds of graphics that are vintage, that are in the public domain that you can use and print them out, cut them out, and add them to your artwork if you want to. But when I do that, most of the time, especially if I use the gel medium, I don't know why, but the fluid medium is not quite as bad as the gel when I do that. It will smear the ink. So I haven't tried spraying a fixative on it, but that's a good idea. You could just play with it. Don't do it on something that's important that you're working on that you don't want to get messed up. But just to practice, you could try spraying some sort of a fixative on it and then put it down. You can also use hairspray as fixative. I don't know if you guys know that or not, but there is, I'll show you, there's an aerosol, and there's also a fixative that comes in a pump that's not aerosol. But you can put this on things that you don't want to smear, like charcoal, which is another thing that you can use in your artwork. If you're a mixed media artist, then you're open to everything. You can try all of it, and you can use it in a way that is going to work and mesh with your style, but you're still using lots of different mediums. So hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have questions, go ahead and type them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them. Hi, Debbie. Thanks, Deborah. My hair is up because it's hot in Florida. Stacy said, what was the name of that again? It's the Graphics Fairy. Graphics Fairy. I'm not sure if it's .com or .org, but it's the only one. You'll see it. Just type, if you just Google Graphics Fairy, you'll find it. My Aunt Mona says, do you remember when we used to paint with oil pastels? I love them. Yes, I still have some. They may be the same kind we used to use. And that's something else that you can do on top of, like if I wanted to add oil pastels on top of this acrylic painting, I could. You can't do the opposite. You can't put acrylic on top of oil, but you can use oil on top of acrylics. And that gives you some really cool textures too. So you can use charcoal, you can use oil pastels, you can use acrylic paints, you can use watercolor. So if you see an artist that creates really pretty abstract watercolors and they have pencil marks in there, they may have some charcoal marks in there, they may have some gold leaf in there somewhere, that's a mixed media painting. Okay, Amy says, how do you choose what papers to use? Do you pick similar colors or just whatever you feel like using? I have a giant stack of paper underneath my work table right here, and I will pull, like for example, if I were to work on this one and I wanted some green leaves, I would just pull random green papers in all different kinds of patterns and see. I may hold it up and see how it looks. but yet I do that strategically. So it's not something that's just random. For example, this painting is a little more muted in color. The flowers, especially the pink, is a muted pink. And so for my green papers that I used on my flowers, I chose more muted greens. I didn't use something that was, really bright and completely different from the color scheme that I have going on here. So that's why I usually paint it first. And sometimes I paint it and I decide not to add any paper to it. But most of the time I add a little bit of something. And sometimes, like with this one, I may paint something like this, and I like the way that the flowers look without paper, but I wanted some paper in the background. So once I paint it, then I kind of decide what I'm going to add to it or what I'm going to leave off. Where this one, of course, it just has the white paper in with the white flowers. So that was kind of a no-brainer. But I mean, I could have used a little bit of yellow paper in there, or I could have used some darker greens and made some different kinds of leaves in the background on that one. But it's just more of a, you've got to play with it and try it and practice a whole lot. And then it's sort of like you kind of know what kind of papers you have. And as you're creating something, it just comes to me that I need to try using this here, or what if I tried using that here? And so the trial and error thing, that's kind of how it usually happens. I also really like polka dots, and so I usually gravitate toward papers or patterns that have polka dots. I don't know why, but they're just kind of happy, and I like adding those to my paintings. Let me see. I'll show you. This is kind of an example of stuff that I have. It's all little pieces and none of it's organized. So if you can imagine this in a stack that's about this tall and 3 rows deep, that's my paper stash. It's underneath here. And I just kind of rummage through there as I'm working on something and decide whether or not I can find the papers that are going to go with the paints that I've already picked out. And my colors most of the time are pretty similar. The color palette that I use is kind of repetitive. I do use the same ones a lot. So I kind of already have an idea that the papers that I have are going to work with the paints that I have. But that's a really good question, because if you put down paper that is not going to mesh with the paints that you've got there, then it's not ever going to look right. You're never going to be happy with it. So you need to match up your papers and your paints as much as possible. And that's a big part of it. So mixed media art basically just means you can use any and everything that's in the craft store. Okay, Tony says, I know I'm not all fancy or anything, but Walmart sometimes has small packs of various kinds of paper in their craft section. I think those might be good to choose because they have a good variety of patterns. Yes, definitely. Paper is paper. Doesn't matter where it comes from. Most of the papers that I have are like scrapbook kinds of papers. I've also got some things that I've printed. I've also got napkins. I've also got tissue paper, just old hymnals. I've used paper from old books. There's really no right or wrong. Tony says you can find paper doilies and metallic type doilies at the Dollar Tree or dollar store. You can find things everywhere. I was wondering what that was about. Oh, in her comment it says I shook my family tree and a bunch of nuts fell out, but I don't I didn't think that had anything to do with what you're saying. That's funny. Okay. Kim says, I love mixed media. It's so fun and adds to creativity choices. That's okay, Tony. She finds things at Dollar Tree. Yes. So the quality of the paper or whatever is not really a big deal. I mean, I use tissue, like tissue paper that you would use to wrap a gift, or I'm trying to think what else is over there. I'm looking on my shelf at all the stuff. Also, ribbon. You can use ribbon like this. They had some really pretty ribbons at Michael's at one point, and it's wired. So all you have to do is cut it, pull the wire out, and then you can add that to your paintings if you want to. Okay. Judy says, do I seal my paintings? Yes, I do. That's another thing. You have to be careful when you're using different things on your artwork to make sure that when you do seal it, you use the right product, because if you've got charcoal on here, or you've got oil pastel on here, or chalk pastel, then you're going to need to use a spray varnish. But if you have just paper and acrylic paint, then you can use your regular, varnish that you would put on with a brush or with a sponge or whatever. So you have to be careful about finishing it for sure. And it depends on what you've got on your canvas or your paper or whatever. So Kelly said it went to a page when she clicked on it. I don't know what that was about. Okay. So yeah, you can buy or you can find things at thrift stores. You can find things at dollar stores. You can find things in your craft stores. Just about anywhere you can find something that can add a little bit of extra whimsy, is that the right word, to your artwork. I usually use pattern papers. I use a lot of dress patterns, which I got in bulk. I got this giant bag of vintage. Well, they weren't really, well, they were older, but it wasn't something that people that sew are probably not going to be happy about this, but the patterns were not cute dresses that people would want to wear today. So I use those in my artwork a lot. Like this piece right here, that's a piece of a dress pattern. I really like it because it has all of these straight, dark, you probably can't see that, can you? They have these black lines that are already in there. Sometimes they're arrows, just words and things that just add a little bit of extra fun. Okay, that makes more sense, Tony, that it was a page that you had liked and it auto fills in. Sometimes when I'm typing something, it'll try to auto fill in someone else's name, and that's it may not even be somebody that I'm friends with. So I don't know why Facebook does that to us. It's okay. All right. So mixed media. I hope this has given you an idea of what it is, what it could be, what it could mean for you. So if you are a watercolor painter and you really enjoy watercolors, then you could just think of some different things that you could add to your watercolor, which I can show you an example of. We did this in my creative community last year. So this was a little watercolor bird that we painted, and I added tissue paper. That was a cross stitch pattern, and this was a piece of a dress pattern. And I splattered it with some paint, of course, but it just gives you some really different ideas, and it opens up a whole different world of creativity when you start thinking outside of just one medium. Okay. Kelly said, loves those mustard colored flowers. Thank you. Tony, I'm always afraid to seal my paintings. Very seldom do I have ones I'm really excited about. So to imagine it getting ruined by sealing is a real fear for me. Yeah, it depends on what you've got on your canvas. You've got to be really careful that you don't, like for example, if you have something that could smear, use a spray. Just spray it. But if you don't, then if you can rub your hand across it and it doesn't smear, then you can use some sort of varnish and it will be fine. You don't have to seal it. That's just up to you. But it will help protect it. If you're going to sell it, then I would definitely put something on there to protect it. But with acrylic paint, especially, it's not something that is really a necessary thing that you have to add in there unless you just want to. I've sold several paintings in the past that didn't get sealed because of what was on there. Now, another thing is if you are going to use a spray sealer on something that has both paper and paint, sometimes the spray will make the paper look a little bit ghost-like. What am I trying to say? Foggy? I don't know. It just messes up the way the paper looks. So my suggestion would be, if you have something that you really want to seal, but you're not sure what to use on it, I would make a little sample of it using the same products on a piece of paper and then varnish it or spray it or whatever, and just do it on that sample and not on the big real thing that you don't want to mess up. So playing around with your seals and your varnishes is a good idea, just to get an idea of what they look like. And in the creative community, there's an actual tutorial in there where I show you several different kinds of varnishes and what the finish would look like after you have used it, so that you don't have to go and buy 10 different kinds of varnish. I don't think I did 10 of them, but you don't have to buy all the different kinds of varnishes. You know, do I like matte? Do I like satin? Do I like gloss? Do I want to spray? What do I need? So there's a little sample in there for you guys if you're interested in that, of me trying out different varnishes. Okay. So if you usually just use one medium, whether it's watercolor or pencils or acrylics or oils, then I would encourage you just to try adding something else in there with it. Just practice and see what happens, because it's really, really fun. There are lots of creative ways that you can use things that are more than just paint. So that's the way that I really enjoy creating. And that also opens up lots of doors for learning and experimenting and playing around with different mediums in general and learning about all of them. So if you're interested in learning more about mixed media art, you can still join my creative community. Right now we're open through the 11th, which is Monday. And also, like I said, I'm going to have a new collection of floral art available. It's called Layers of Beauty, and it's going to be over on my website on the 14th. I'm shooting for noon. I'm going to have everything ready and open and available at noon, which is Central Time over here where I live. And My website is artbymandyhilburn.com, and I've got links here in the description for you. I think I've answered everyone's questions. If you have something else that you wanted to ask, then you can still type your questions if you're watching the replay, and I'll do my best to come back and answer them as I'm able. But thanks for being here today. And tomorrow at noon, we're going to be here again, and we're going to do a little bit of some paint demonstrations. So that will be fun. And if you want to join me then set a little reminder so you don't forget. And we'll be back here at noon tomorrow. So I'll see you then. Bye.